I know I haven't discussed this on my channel yet, but in the past few years, I've become quite a big fan of Super Sentai. Of course, I was already a fan of Power Rangers as a kid. I did make a whole video on why the Disney era of Power Rangers is my favorite, but Sentai is a wholly unique beast from Power Rangers. However, in the time that I got into it, my friends and I got to experience the greatness of those last final years. I got to watch the peak that is Boom Boonger, and I also got to watch gozyuger. Okay, I liked about 60 to 70% of that show, but the latter half of the series left much to be desired. And sadly, on a very conflicted note, Sentai more or less ended. Now, from what Toei has said, this is more of an indefinite hiatus, which the Kamen Rider series actually got into in the 90s and I think late 80s. But Sentai was one of the 4 tokusatsu pillars. You can't just take Sentai out of the equation with nothing to show for it. What will the Japanese children watch now? Well, Kamen Rider for one, but Toei instead decided to do something I found incredibly interesting. They revived the long-dormant Metal Heroes line of tokusatsu shows. Sort of. They revived the title name of its very first series, Gavan, and made something that I think is honestly one of the coolest and fun toku series I've seen in a minute. Yeah, I said it, I'm a day one enjoyer of Gavan Infinity and Project Red. Hell, I was watching the trailers, the suit reveals, this whole idea intrigued me so much. What I'm more or less here to do in this video is talk about how much I like this show so far. And if I'm being real, talk about how a lot of the hate towards Gavan, and the fact that it's now in the time slot which Super Sentai once had, is really overblown, people. Look, I'll be the first one to admit that it is sad to see a series you love go away. But in Toei's defense, and I can't believe I'm defending Toei's greedy ass, they really did try to keep the series afloat. In the 2010s and 2020s, we really did get some classic and great series, but from what I understand, it just wasn't clicking with their target demographic, that being young Japanese boys from ages about 6 to 10. And if I'm allowed to say something here, hiatuses can be a great thing for a series. There's a good reason why so many series go away for a while and come back fresher than ever. Literally, Kamen Rider is a great example of this. The Heisei Rider of Era is widely regarded as having some of the best shows in all of Toku. Another example, one of my favorite series benefiting from a hiatus is Doctor Who. Before its break, Doctor Who had been running for 26 years. We had 7 regenerations of the Doctor, and I'm not going to say any of it was inherently bad. In fact, a lot of it was pretty good. I personally love the 7th Doctor. But it's clear that people wanted a break. Thus, when it finally came back in 2005, it was debatably a Doctor Who renaissance. Everything from Eccleston to Capaldi is probably some of the best sci-fi I've ever watched. It seems like now we never get a break from any popular series. We live in an era, and I can't believe I'm describing it as such, we live in an era of slop. Our mindless consumption of just feeding and feeding and feeding. Many of these series would just benefit from like a 5-year break. I'm looking at you, MCU. You literally just become homework now. Sadly, I also like to say Star Wars has slipped into this more well to some extent. And I think that many people in the Sentai crowd also thought this was the case for Sentai. If I'ma be real, the writing was on the wall. I said earlier that gozyuger was a bit lackluster, but that was clearly because that series was going through some production hell. Plus, Toei lost a lot of respect for the way they fired Maya Imamori. Cause let's be honest, there was clearly some misogynistic and racist undertones to it, but that's a topic for someone else more qualified than me to cover. So when I saw that Project Red was going to be this fresh take that combines elements of Toei's many tokusatsu series together, I was intrigued. Sure, it's using the name of Gavan, but it's much more than a legacy series. It's much more of a tokusatsu show taken to its logical extreme, traveling through space and the literal multiverse. Which I want to add here, so far Gavan is one of the few examples of how to do a multiverse correctly. They instead use it to make a lot of fun little spins on Earth and how it could change through different alternate histories. They're clearly setting up for the whole multiversal elements to lead into some very high concept shenanigans, and I'm here for it. To be honest, it's very rare that Toku goes into some high concept science fiction, and I'm also liking so far what Gavan is providing to the table. I mean, just look at these suits. Gavan Infinity has, in my opinion, one of the best hero designs I've seen in years. The shimmery chrome-like textures are just so fresh and so clean. Plus his suit looks somewhat alien, but also in a way that's not too uncanny. It feels like if you asked an alien to design a Kamen Rider and mix it with a Super Sentai suit, and you'd get Gavan Infinity. That's not meant to be a criticism, in fact I'd say it's a strength to the design itself. That leads me into the action of the series, and I'm gonna be real, we're getting some great fight scenes. Toei has been killing it recently with their action scenes, and Gavan Infinity might be some of their most inventive and fluent action scenes since Kamen Rider Gav. The action is so flowing and smooth. And whenever Gavan does their emotional burst and these lines on the suit glows, dude, it's like the coolest thing ever. It creates a super unique visual showing them powering up and letting loose. The mecha is also one of my favorites. It's the sort of modular Transformers type of mecha. It has these parts that come on and off for different scenarios. It's also a spaceship that can travel to different universes. Oh, come on, you gotta admit this is cool! The way they also deal with each universe is clever. Sure, it is Earth every time, but we encounter Doki, who's the star character, aka Gavan Infinity, experiencing culture shock each time he solves a case. Like episode 4, when he learns that bugs have human level intellect and can speak with us, and then seeing that an ant is the Gavan of this universe. That's really fun and creative. It sets up for good gags as well as surprisingly creative action. Each episode also gives us little peeks into what kind of organization is doing these investigations and just how wide and vast this world is. It feels like it has infinite potential and so much room to grow. Though if I did have any critiques so far after watching the first 5 episodes, I'd say I only have 3. 1, the CGI could be a bit off-putting. I understand CGI for toku shows aren't always the greatest, but it doesn't feel blended in well to the environments they're presenting us. Like, Kamen Rider Z's CGI feels much more natural and wired in better. Maybe that's because Gavan has a smaller budget because it is a newer show, but I feel like Toei maybe should take more time working on the CGI for Gavan since it's meant to be their big new project. I also think the whole side tangent of whenever a Gavan changes to explain the transformation is genuinely a waste of time. Like, it makes sense the first time we see Doki say Jochaku and henshin, but when it happens every time a Gavan henshins, I feel like we get it already. I know the show is made for kids, yeah, but I hope that's something they drop in the future so we can get more time developing other things and allowing more time for action scenes. A third thing I honestly should mention is the comedic relief duo of Wanibuchi and Patran. They could be a bit grating if I'm going to be honest. I get the whole gag as they think the archive guys are doing nothing because it's all hush-hush, but I already feel like the gag is losing its steam. Though I think there is a way to pivot these characters into lovable idiots or dorky schemers. And again, before someone goes, it's for kids. Yeah, I know, you're not very clever when you make that comment. You know, you can also make humor that's for all ages and still make it fresh. There's a lot of shows that are an example of this. I'm just making you aware of that. But I do think Gavan Infinity and Project Red by extension shows a lot of promise. It really feels like Toei is examining what made their prior successes and ideas work and mixing them in to make this new fresh take. I know some will never get over the fact that this is what we have now, and Super Sentai is seemingly no more. But to that I say, we have to let new things grow sometimes. To me, I don't see Project Red as a Sentai replacement, but instead a child of Sentai, and as well as many other toku shows for that matter. Traits from the Toei Tokusatsu family tree all coming together into one new being. One whose potential is infinite. And if you really wanted to watch more Sentai, then you can watch the 50 years of older series. So yeah, that's all I really got to talk about today. I quite like Gavan, but as I said, I feel like there's quite a bit of hate online for it. There's even people wanting it to fail because that thinks they'll somehow summon Super Sentai from the ether. Newsflash, if Gavan fails, they might not do other tokusatsu shows. They might just think that only people like Kamen Rider. And I like Kamen Rider, but I don't want Kamen Rider to exist in a vacuum now, do we? I honestly think Gavan is a super unique and fresh take that I think people should try and check out, you know? There's a lot of toku sites you can watch it on, trust me. Don't tell them you heard that from me though. But with all that being said, I'll see you next time.